Hello, Laverne here, and thank you for joining me. May this video be a blessing to you, and may it honor and glorify God and His kingdom. In this video, I'm going to explain why it is that atheists and atheism is the single greatest threat to man's evolution. I say this in spite of the fact that atheists are the staunchest, strongest supporters of evolution. But in spite of this, they are still the single greatest threat to man's evolution and possibly to the entire planet. Now, I would like to explain that I am a Christian, but I am a Christian who believes that the earth and the universe are billions of years old. I've made a good number of videos explaining that Scripture supports this. And by Scripture, I do not restrict myself to the 66 books of the Protestant Bible, but rather I believe there are a good number of books that are inspired by God, such as the writings of Enoch. Now, I'm not going to explain in this video why it is, in detail that I believe these things. I just wanted to explain that I do believe in evolution. I also believe that God has used evolution, that He has been very patient, and He has used this system of evolution both in the physical and spiritual sense to bring man to the point that he is today, and to bring us to a point where we will be considered His children, and that we will one day be in His kingdom, spending eternity with Him, and that He has set up this system billions of years ago leading up to this point. This just shows the magnificence, and the grandness. Sorry, I'm getting a little tongue-tied, but just how grand and magnificent God really is. Now, for most of the rest of the video, I'm going to look at atheism and evolution from the perspective of the atheist. And for the purpose of this video, an atheist will be defined as someone who believes that God does not exist, that there is no intelligent designer whatsoever, that this is the only life we live, the physical world is the only world there is. So that's my definition of an atheist. Now, I would like to try and imagine going back to the time when man first became aware of himself, first became aware of who he is. Now, imagine, if you will, the options that were available to him. Atheists want to tell us that man came up with religion for a number of different reasons. One is to try and give comfort to this idea of his own mortality, that when man considered that this is the only life, it became too much for him to bear, and so he came up with this idea of a life after this one, a spiritual life. And it was simply a way of giving him comfort when his loved ones died or when he thought about himself dying. Other atheists will say, no, religion was created for the purpose of suppressing and oppressing the masses to try and control them. Still others will say, no, religion was created for the purpose of trying to explain the things that happened around us, that they didn't have the knowledge of science that we have today, and so they came up with this idea of gods being in control of lightning, thunder, creating earthquakes, drought, and so on. So according to atheists, there are a few different reasons why man would come up with the idea of gods and some kind of intelligent designer. Unfortunately, they don't have any proof for this. It's parroted and it's presented as if it is actual proof, and they'll state it as such. But the truth is, there is no proof of this. It is simply a theory, an idea that is put forward. But as I said, for the purpose of this video, I'm going to consider the fact that atheism is true. Now, let's consider this point where man becomes aware of himself. He has two options available to him. At this point, there is a split in our evolution. Going one way is the belief in some kind of intelligent designer. The other way, atheism, that there is no God. the end of this life is all there is to it. There's nothing to look forward to after this life. These are the two choices. And whether you want to consider it or not, it is evolution. It is a split in our evolution. And if you argue this point, if you don't agree with this, if you don't like this argument, then consider what Dawkins and many atheists are now telling us, that morality has evolved. So you cannot argue that morality and this idea of what's right and wrong has evolved, but that God has had, nothing to do with it. If you want to come from the perspective that you can take God out of the idea of morality, then you must, and that you're going to say that morality has evolved, evolution has been very much a part of our evolving morality, then this idea of a split in our evolution in regards to religion and belief in God or a disbelief in God is also true. It stands to reason. Now, let's consider those people, because when we think of evolution, we know that there are certain characteristics that if they have a negative impact, then the people with that characteristic, or I shouldn't say people, but the plant, animal, or whatever, if they have this characteristic that's a negative characteristic, they will die out. Someone or something born with a positive characteristic that helps will then go on. They'll prosper, and there'll be other creatures created from them. So their line will continue, whereas the being or the animal, the plant, created with a negative characteristic, that line will die out. Well, let's look at this belief system. We have the belief system of an intelligent designer, and we have the belief system of no intelligent designer. We look at the history of the world. Virtually in every part of the globe, man has believed in some kind of intelligent designer. We see this as far back as we can find evidence of man with any kind of archaeological evidence. Nowhere do we find, at least to my knowledge, any kind of culture that grew to any prominence that believed as atheists believe. In other words, out of these two possibilities, these two lines, one prospered, one died out. And that's what we see today. Today, atheists love to point at pieces of the puzzle. They'll take a small piece of religion, some aspect of it, something that has happened in our history, and they'll blow it up as if this is the entire puzzle and it represents everything about religion and about faith. But they refuse to look at the big picture being where we are today, where man has come and where he has come from. And what we see is that man has evolved, has prospered, and has come to the point that we are today. And we have done this with the belief, and only in the belief, of some kind of intelligent designer on a global scale, on a historical scale. As far as we can go back, that is the case. So let's look at those examples of cultures, societies that believed in atheism. They are virtually non-existent. So we must consider this. We must accept the fact that those cultures who believed in atheism, who did not believe in an intelligent designer, those cultures died out. Whereas those who believed in some kind of intelligent design have flourished to the point where we are today. Now, if this is the case all throughout history, we must assume then that it will continue to be the case in the future, and that if atheism is allowed to get a foothold and to expand and to be accepted on a global scale, then the extermination of our species will be on a global scale, just as it has been on a nation or a culture basis in the past. Now, just to look at some evidence in the world today, if we look at the suicide rates in the United States, there's evidence that atheists have a disproportionate number of suicides. So their belief system has a direct effect on how they look at life. And there are more atheists committing suicide than any other group. This is disturbing, and it's something we must consider. It is one of the reasons why these cultures die out. So this is why I say, even if atheism is true, their belief system is true, they still remain the greatest threat to man's evolution. You see, when it comes to evolution, truth is irrelevant. If you believe the atheist view, then evolution and truth are irrelevant. Truth has nothing to do with whether a species is going to survive or become extinct, whether it's going to prosper or not. Truth is irrelevant. If we have a lie, but that lie is good, if that lie helps a species progress and move along and prosper, but then we have a truth that results in a species being exterminated, that it can't survive, then that truth is detrimental, whereas the lie is a positive. And for this reason, atheism is without a doubt a negative. Even if we accept the fact that it's true, it still is a detrimental characteristic. And if it's accepted worldwide, it could very well become the thing that causes mankind to become extinct. Now, I'd like to finish with one final note, and that's going back to Christianity and the belief within Christianity. You see, Christians believe that Satan, Lucifer, is known as the god of this world. Another way to describe him is the prince of air. This is a description given to him in Scripture. Prince of air is referring, one, to thoughts, but it also refers to the communication that's going on in the world today. Consider television, radio, and the internet, how the information is transferred through the air, and Satan is the prince of the air. It is no wonder then that atheism is growing the way it is. It isn't until today, 6,000 years after Adam, that we are now at a point where Satan, who is prince of the air, can really take advantage of communicating through the air. And that's what we see happening today. And this is why atheism is growing the way it is. It is Satan taking advantage of who he is, that being prince of the air. And atheism is growing because of the invention and the technology that has allowed the internet, television, and radio. This is why atheism is growing. And even if you are an atheist and you don't believe in God, consider the effects of atheism, both historically and what we see taking place in the world today. All right, as always, I look forward to comments and messages. Till next time, peace and blessings.